So it's election day in the United States. As I'm recording this, it is Tuesday, November 8th. And I want to talk to particularly to the fears that some have that, oh no, if the Republicans take the House or take the Senate or both, then what's going to happen to Ukraine? So I'm a Republican and I'm telling you it's going to be a great night for Republicans, but I don't think that you have to fear about support for Ukraine. And if you stay with me for just 5 minutes or so, I'm going to lay out my case why. I wanted to talk about this one specific issue because I saw an article in Politico a little bit ago that said Ukraine frets about U.S. midterms, and I don't really think that they should. Yes, there's a difference between Republicans and Democrats, but okay, so just hear me, and I'll make this clear. Okay, so there's mounting anxiety about what Tuesday's American midterm elections may mean for for Ukraine and U.S. support for the country. Now, Republicans are going to take back the House. It's going to be by a big margin. They may even take the Senate. We'll find out how that all works. But I don't think it's going to mean anything for Ukraine, and here's why. So, House Minority Leader said last month that there would be no blank check for Ukraine. Okay, that was him positioning himself against his opponent politically. And I think he's also speaking to this feeling within conservatives that there's just money going out and there's no real control. But at the same time, you also have the Senate minority, probably Senate majority leader on the other side, who's saying he's not going to let up on support. This is Mitch McConnell. He's not going to let up with support for Ukraine. And then you have Joe Biden, who has Lend-Lease at least authority, if nothing else, if everything else fell apart. So this is Kevin McCarthy. He's the one that said no blank check. Now, I'd also add that you have some resistance from the progressives, although it's less. There was a Wall Street Journal poll that came out, and in the poll you find things like 30% of respondents overall in a new survey believe that the administration is doing too much to help Ukraine. And the administration is actually doing quite a bit to help Ukraine. And it's to the point like where it's changed significantly between GOP, who thought that they were not doing enough early on, and they think, yeah, you're doing a lot. But it's doing a lot compared to whatever Europe's doing, I think is part of it, as well as what they could be doing domestically at home. So here's a good article in The Hill. The Hill is a fairly balanced American political magazine. The more Republicans opposed to continuing Ukraine aid, says a survey, and they're talking about the same survey, and they unpack it. 48% of registered Republicans said that they believe the U.S. was doing too much in Ukraine, and that seems like a high number until you unpack the reasons why. 17% of Republicans in the new survey said they believe the U.S. isn't doing enough. Like, the U.S. is doing a lot. I mean, they're really doing a lot. So I understand why that's fallen out the way it has, but almost a third is the percent that thinks that they're doing too much. So you have 70% of the population that is Democrats, independents, and Republicans. 70% of that whole is still thinking that lots of support for Ukraine. Add to that within one election cycle, not a lot's going to happen. We need to focus on what's going to happen in Ukraine over the next 2 years before the presidential election, because most of the movement here, most of what's important is going to happen within the next year, maybe the next 2 years, and that's where the action is. Democrats, 81%, said that they support additional financial aid for Ukraine. Now, that's not anything out of bounds. That's absolutely what you would expect them, because Democrats are generally for support of all kinds of things. They're a little bit more free with the money, generally speaking, compared to conservatives in general, but to their credit, they at a higher rate support Ukraine, as opposed to 35% of Republicans and 45% of independent respondents. Okay, so I don't think that with those numbers that there's any danger that anything is going to go sideways for Ukraine. So I just want to point that out. Now let me point out one other thing. Ukraine didn't even make it to the list of the top issues. So there's no anti-Ukraine coalition. What conservatives are worried about is they're being a little bit too free with the money, but they're also worried about there's a somewhat populist and maybe a little isolationist wing on the Republican side, and that wing is really particularly interested in not starting World War III. So there's not an appetite for not supporting Ukraine financially, but there is an appetite for not getting into World War III by sending American troops to Ukraine. But that nobody's asking for that. So that's part of what's going on. Let me show you this last thing. Here is Pew Research, a very respected research poll just a few days ago. Key facts about U.S. voter priorities in the midterms. And Ukraine, like, supporting or not supporting Ukraine doesn't even factor in. What are the issues? Economy, huge. Future democracy in the country, education, healthcare, energy policy, violent crime, policies about how elections and voting in a country, gun policy, abortion, Supreme Court appointments, immigration, foreign policy. Foreign policy is way low. I guess you could wrap Ukraine in somewhere in there. So it's not even anywhere on the in the upper echelons of what's going on. So if you're supporting Ukraine, if you care about Ukraine, if you want to know what's going on, I don't think that the American midterm elections is going to make a dime's worth of difference for support for Ukraine, at least not for 2 years. So put that to rest. So thanks for listening to me. I don't think that you have anything to fear about what's going to happen because of the U.S. elections. Remember, the Brits have been through Boris Johnson, and then they've been through a second prime minister, and now they're to a third prime minister with no lack of support for Ukraine. So I don't think we have anything to fear. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for being the kind of person who cares about Ukraine.